here in Greenville, South Carolina on Tuesday evening, June 23rd, 2015. We had thunderstorms called for. It was also in the upper 90s. So I decided I would skip out on the Tuesday Night Worlds at our local Donaldson Center and head over to Watopia, Zwift Island, to participate in the Tuesday Night Worlds there. We got off to a good start here at the bridge with around 20 people participating. The largest group was the category B. And what we have here are basically three groups that ride together. Category A, which are supposed to be folks who can average around a 4.0 watts per kilogram FTP. And then you have Category B, which would follow up after that, and then Category C, which would be an even, if I could use the word, slower group, those people who aren't able to average as much wattage. We're underway here, and as we started off, my strategy was to stay with the group, and for the first straight, it appeared that my thoughts that the group would stay together and measure each one up seemed to be working the way that I thought. On this particular Watopia course, we're going in the reverse direction, and that means right off the bat, you're going into a rather long climb. So I thought we would take it easy pretty much up that climb, but here you'll see that at the base, Frank Garcia suddenly puts in an effort and creates a gap. At this moment, I had a choice to make. I could follow him, or I could hang back with the group. I wanted to see what other people would do, and I noticed that only one rider went off with Frank. And that gave me the impression that they wouldn't be able to hang out there for that long. So my thought at that point was to stay with the group, allow the group to work together, and bring them back. And we're going to see how that works out. Let me also explain to you that this particular video is not the entire race. Basically, I'm going to show my participation and the part of the race that I was in, and then we'll kind of skip around throughout the second part of the race where I follow along with the folks who ended up being in contention for the race. The two guys were up ahead of us, and I was there with Nathan Gurria, who I thought would be a good wheel to hang around because if you know anything about him, you know he can pull long and hard. Pretty good racer, not only on Watopia, but also in real life. So my thought was if I stayed with him, at some point, either the guys up front would tire or we would be able to pull together the group and chase him down. And that's what you see happening here, or at least I thought it was, as three of the riders went off. Whoa, there went a guy right into the side of the mountain, which brings us to a second part of this particular recording. It was a very weird night on Watopia. Matter of fact, I think I started calling it Warptopia because there were so many latency issues and people going off the track, back on, disappearing, reappearing. Even some people ended up getting dropped off of the network. So it was a very interesting and chaotic night, logistics-wise, if not racing-wise. In this case, you can see me picking up my wattage, trying to get up to Nathan, and I was wanting to get in behind him and draft. And as I closed in, you can see I'm getting into the draft, and I missed it. I went right on past him. It's one of the issues with riding with the kicker because you can't really control how long you're holding the wattage. You will stop pedaling and the inertia of the machine, the trainer, will keep you moving forward. So you can see I tried to stay with Nathan, and I noticed Merrick went off. Not only did he get us, he went over the top and kept going over the KOM line. So we chased him down and started to catch up a little bit with the group that was up ahead of us. Problem for me is that using the kicker, it's again a kicker issue. Downhill is very hard for me because no matter what I do, I just can't seem to get the wattage up. Going over 100 RPM in 5311, and I'm still not able to get up enough wattage to chase down the people on the downhill. So I work so hard to stay with the group climbing, and then we come over the top, and then I get dropped on the downhill. I mean, how often do you get dropped on a non-technical downhill? But that's what happens to me. So we're coming off. I'm feeling a little disgusted with the fact that I can't stay up with the guys. And I realize I've got to stay with them here on the flats as much as possible once we kind of level off, and I can perhaps chase them down. Caught up with Nathan again, and that made me feel good because, again, my strategy was if I could stay with him, I should be good for the rest of the race. Thing is, you're going to find out in just a minute or so why that was not a good strategy. But for now, I was here. Nathan was there. Some other of the riders in the B group were right there. The other thing about the A group tonight that I had to keep in mind was it was a smaller group of A riders. So if the majority of them got off the front and I was in the B group, it wasn't going to do me any good to hang back there. I would need to get up with them. And here you'll see that Nathan was riding my wheel as we came through the banner that marks the lap as well as the finish. Nathan moved up, and I was like, good. I'm going to come up here and I'm going to work to get into his draft and let him pull me up toward the front. As you can see, the other riders ahead of me, Garcia, Merrick, and Nahorniak, were probably around 13 to 20 seconds ahead of me. And here's where you see Nathan says no recovery ride with this group. And I realized at that point that he wasn't even a part of the race. He was just there hanging out with us doing his recovery ride. Then he goes on and comments, shouldn't mess with you if you're in the race. And I realized at that point I was going to have to do this on my own. Nathan wasn't going to be there to help me. No fault of his own. I mean, he didn't mark out to the side of his name that he was participating. I just kind of assumed that he was. So I set out trying to race back. Here we are going across the Sprint Bridge, trying to close in on these guys who were now about 20 seconds ahead of me. It kept fluctuating back and forth. Sometimes it was over 20 seconds. Other times it was just 10 seconds. My thought was I would just try to stay within striking distance, and then on the climb I would attack and give it the biggest burst I could to catch up with them. And it turned out that as we got into the climb, I was closer than I thought I would be. So I ramped it up over 400 watts. And then as I saw the time dropping, the gap dropping, I even lifted it up a little bit higher as the grade kicked in over 500 watts. And there you can see them ahead right three together. Those are the guys I was chasing. Finally, I had closed down the gap, and with my heart rate well into the red, I would even say above the red, I caught up with them. At first, I even thought maybe I will just go through them and set my own pace on the climb. But seeing my heart rate, I knew I needed to back off and try to conserve as much as I could. Of course, that's hard to do when they pick up with fresh legs, or I should say fresher legs, and they're able to maintain a higher speed. So I found myself even having to attack once more just to stay with the group. There you can see how the kicker works. Once again, trying to catch up with them, having to get up big wattage, then trying to get in their draft. I go right on past them because of the momentum in the flywheel of the kicker. But thankfully, I was able to stay with them here for a while, trying to bring down my heart rate. Still hitting up around 180 beats per minute. There you see Merrick go shooting across the side, the road, and that was happening all through the night. You would see someone disappear and reappear, just like you saw, and go off veering. Here, I kind of got tangled up with him as he was veering back and forth because of the latency issues. But I tried my best to stay with them and be there over the top, trying to pick up the wattage a little bit in hopes that I could stay with them. Of course, still up with the high beats per minute. For me, 74, if I'm around 74, I can maintain that pretty well. But once I start getting between 174 and 180 beats per minute with my heart rate, that means I'm going to start losing power. And I was fighting to get it down, but in order to get it down, I had to lower my wattage, and then I would get dropped. And then again, here we are on this downhill, and it just seemed like a losing battle to be going downhill and watching the people ride away from you. So at this point, I have to admit, I kind of gave up and decided not to chase, which was kind of in the back of my mind anyway, because I had started out the evening thinking about not even participating in the race, but logging in, spinning easily, and doing kind of like a Tour de France TV special where I could record from different angles. So this just gave me the chance to do that. Ironically, as I was sending out the message that I couldn't get out of the red zone, my heart rate had dropped down into the 160s. But by that time, it was definitely too late. So I stuck with the guys that happened to be there in front. And the folks that we have here are Angeli, I believe that's how you would pronounce his name, Nahorniak, Frank Garcia, and P. Merrick. These are the guys that were in the battle for the top spot in the finish. Now, Angeli was kind of an interesting situation because he was with the group, the larger group that started out, and then he disappeared. Later, as we had been climbing, and I showed you me chasing and climbing, he appeared in front of us. So it appeared that maybe he had a network issue, had to log out, log back in, and kind of waited for us at the top of the hill. So he wasn't riding at speed at that point. He was just kind of waiting, and we overtook him. From that point, at least for the rest of the time that I was watching, he was riding with the group that was left. So we go over and look at his login or his avatar through the fan view, you'll notice that he did not travel the same amount of time. I think it was 5.2 miles at this point was recorded for him, while the other guys show that they've ridden quite a bit more. But they're staying here together, riding. You can tell they're not at a very hard pace, under 300 watts. And I get the impression that most of these guys are probably a little lighter than me, so that 300 watts carries a little bit more speed than it would be with me. Now, Frank started getting gapped a little bit, then working back to the group, and he was yo-yoing quite a bit through the rest of the race. Here's P. Merrick behind Angeli, catching, coming over the top. This was really the story of the rest of the race, except for the latency issues that they ended up having to deal with. And ultimately, it cost Nahorniak, and actually it's right at this point, he was having so many issues, he ended up getting dropped and was not able to continue. Turns out we found out there was a storm going on in his area, and he actually lost power at his house about 30 minutes after the race. So now we're down to Angeli, Garcia, and Merrick in the finish. Weidman, who is the organizer of these races, had to leave earlier, and he told us that was going to be the case. Then he returned just to participate, not in a competitive way, but just to be in there and enjoy the time racing with the other guys. You can still see that Merrick is sometimes going off the course and then back on. There was one, I don't know if I recorded it here, but Angeli one time just rides on like a cyclocross. He goes right off the curve of the road and into a flowery meadow. So it was very interesting watching from this standpoint. To be honest, on Zwift, this was the first time. Oh, there he goes. Whoa, now he's riding on water. That's pretty incredible. Now, the problem for me is right at that point, because when they went off the screen, if I was on their avatar, I would then skip to another rider, and sometimes it would skip to a rider that wasn't even participating in the race. That cost us later, because what happened was it skipped and it left me as the only rider on the leaderboard. And that caused me to lose visual. There goes Merrick riding around in circles. But it caused me to lose visual with the other guys. And I was not able to record the finish. So I'll let you in on that little secret right now, that I'm not able to catch the finish. But it still was interesting watching Angeli. I never found out exactly what happened to him, but he was a pretty strong rider. I think that he and Nahorniak probably were the strongest riders. Don't know if maybe Angeli got some rest while he was out there, but he seemed to be doing very well. It was going back and forth with Merrick and Angeli because one of them would take off, and I would think, man, he's got it. Then the other one would catch up. But Garcia, as well as Weidman, they began having some issues, having to fall back, and it turned out to be Angeli and Merrick forming the final two. I was trying to cheer on Garcia to go up there and catch them, but he wasn't able to do it. And after a valiant effort, he had to fall back. Then I got to thinking, well, it's going to be Angeli or Merrick that's going to win. And I started getting a little bit bored at this point because it seemed like it was turning into a done deal. Still enjoying Watopia. I'm also enjoying the reverse. Here you'll see me clicking back and forth trying to figure out the distance between them. And you could see that Angeli was closer there to the statues, but Merrick was 13 seconds back, but visually not that far. So it was going to be a good race between the two of them. You can see over on the leaderboard that I've even entered on the picture as they are coming around, getting close to catching me. So it's going to be very close to me getting lapped. Garcia still hanging in there about 20-some seconds back, though ultimately it would end up being a larger gap than that. Angeli and Merrick. Here we're watching Merrick at 300 and some watts, and then switching over to Angeli, we see he also is putting out 300 plus watts. Weidman was falling back by minutes. Garcia still hanging within 30 seconds, but not closing that down any. Angeli having a pretty good gap there on Merrick, but again, that didn't last. Then I was on my own because I guess I just got out of range of the other guys. I lost connection with them. Had my own latency issues there for a second. So I decided I would go for the KOM. So I saw that Frank Garcia had the 248, and I thought, that's within striking range, and I can finish off my night at least with something, hoping to get the polka dot jersey. So I started off at a good pace to see what I could do. Suddenly I noticed that the time started dropping on the KOM jersey. At least I should say they were rising, because what happens is if you hold a jersey and you are riding, you lose it after an hour. It will go to the person behind you. And so you'll see it went into a quick succession there of losses, as those guys were all riding together at the time they got their speed and distance and time up the KOM, because they were all participating in the race. So 3 or 4 guys, it shifted between all of them. Finally, it settled here on K Vida, and I was chasing after that. So now, instead of having to do 248, I now only had to do 260 seconds. So I knew I didn't have to work as hard in order to pull this off. This was a unsatisfying race because really the latency issues. It meant everything was disjointed. Even racing myself, obviously I was disappointed with my performance. I'm hoping to find out why my Quark was not connecting to the Ant Plus dongle. If I'm using the Quark, it's not nearly as bad, because what you can do is have a regular power meter tell the computer what wattage you're putting out, and then the computer sends the signal from Zwift to your kicker or your smart trainer. And rather than the smart trainer controlling what's happening on Zwift, it is your, in my case, crank-based power meter. That means what I'm putting out at the crank is what is being sent to Zwift. So I don't have to worry about that inertia and momentum that you have with the kicker. It's more instantaneous. So when I'm going downhill, it's not the kicker's momentum that and the power of that's going to Zwift. It's actually the power I'm putting out at the crank. So I found in the past when I was racing with the Quark, it was much easier to stay in the group, stay in the draft. It was also much easier to stay with people going downhill. Now going uphill, again, you didn't have that initial burst of speed that you get when you're with the kicker. But I would much rather be riding with the Quark sending the data to Zwift and the smart trainer receiving the data. I don't like really riding with just one of either. I'm not a big fan of the, if I could call it, dumb trainer and the Quark. And learning that I'm not a big fan, at least in racing, of the kicker by itself. So here we go, heading up toward the end. It's going to end the night. Going for the KOM is kind of a known thing that I was going to make it, and sure did. I even beat Frank and ended up with the polka dot, and that was it. Turns out it was a very good workout for me, and you can see that in the numbers. 318 watts for 20 minutes was my best effort. Not too bad. So that's it. Try it again later. IDoIt4.org and lowcadence.com. Be sure to stop by and visit.